Hi everyone, I'm here talking to my friend Jenny Lay-Flurrie, and guess what? It's her birthday! Everybody say happy birthday, JLF! I'm so excited to talk to you here about accessibility and the intersection of AI and accessibility and that in its importance. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Yesterday was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see full rooms really digging into the potential of AI and accessibility, responsible, so many different topics.
Right. And this year is Microsoft's 50th year, right? Yes. We're celebrating that. And accessibility has been a part of the 30 years of Microsoft's history. How does history help us understand why accessibility is essential in today's AI-powered world?
It's been a really fun year and terrible in some ways, because every day I've had a reminder that this is my 50th birthday year as well. But it's fun to think back on the history and the learnings that we've had.
Right.
Accessibility started at Microsoft in the 90s. I'm sure there were veins before that. Our first feature was in 1994,
right.
Which is still in Windows today, a feature called sticky keys, which if you hit Alt too many times will come up, which is still important. I think the foundation that we built over the decades, which is making sure that we build technology with people, and in particular, experts, who in our case are people with disabilities.
Yeah.
That's our biggest learning.
Right.
If you boil it down, which has never been more important as we think about AI and what is possible across the spectrum of humanity, but particularly disabled people, which is 1.3 billion people around the world. 83% of us will experience disability at some point in our lives.
Exactly. And I think what's super important as well is that when you take into consideration allowing for people of disabilities, building for people with disabilities, you make the world a better place for everyone, right? If you think about ramps and curb cuts, how many of us use those and you don't identify with having a disability, right? So many organizations are introduced to accessibility as a compliance, right? Why should enterprises see it as a driver of productivity, talent, market growth, and AI innovation?
I just love how you frame that question.
Yeah.
And you mentioned history, like curb cuts.
Yes.
Last night I got to nip out to Berkeley to visit the Ed Roberts Center over there, which is kind of the epitome of that. Disability rights, which began right there.
Right.
It began actually here in San Francisco. And over the years, over the decades, over the centuries, people with disabilities have been innovating. Most people don't realize the electric toothbrush was designed for people with limited mobility. So you think about that potential. If you're not designing with and for humans, including disability, you are quite frankly missing out.
Right.
If your website, product, agent, app is not accessible or including accessibility, you're missing out on up to 20 to 25% of your potential customer base and your employees.
Right.
I remember 75% of disability, non-apparent. You cannot see it. You don't know that I'm disabled just by looking at me.
Exactly.
So it's really important to include the basics and design for making sure that you breathe in regulation. Regulation is important, and it sets the minimum bar.
Right.
But go after changing paradigms, which is even more possible with AI right now.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I think for a lot of people watching, like, it's super important. Look at the history, right, behind things like I mentioned, curb cuts, regulations, because how many of you, especially coming here to Ignite, are dragging your suitcase across the road and you're like, oh, I'm gonna use the curb cut, right? If we weren't innovating and building for people with disabilities, that wouldn't exist. Now take a moment and like marinate on that, right? And I think you have a mouse to show us some designs, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, we've got so many toys that we can talk about. This is the Microsoft Adaptive Mouse. And again, it was designed by people, for people with limited mobility. And it's really super fun because it's got basically a mouse segment.
I love that.
Which is the smallest mouse we have ever produced.
Right.
It's also great for travel. You can just stick it in your pocket and be done.
Love that.
But the fun part is the tail. It's the only mouse where we put the CAD files online so that you can 3D print whatever tail works for you. So whether you have limited mobility in your hand, arthritis, RSI, or you just get tired, you can swap your tail. So we've got 3D printers downstairs printing a whole bunch of tails, which makes it easy, affordable, and we want everyone to play with technology like this. This actually, the fun backstory is this is part of a broad hardware program that we have led by the Surface team that has worked on the packaging, and some folks, you can go back to the Xbox Adaptive Controller in 2017, which was the first game controller that really breathed in the fact that not everyone has opposable thumbs, and came out with an incredible Super Bowl ad and holiday campaign, but the first game controller for over 400 million disabled gamers.
That is incredible. And you mentioned that downstairs here at Ignite, people can go and get a printable.
Yes.
Go wow. Play. But what about the people watching online? Like, how can they get the CAD design?
This is all available on Microsoft.com. Go to Microsoft.com/accessibility and you will find all of this and far more. And I promise you, you will find a feature. Even if you don't identify as disabled today, you will find features in there that will make your computer use easy. One of my favorites is just the shortcut, Windows key U. That brings up all of the settings in Windows. And simple things like making your mouse a little bit bigger on the screen, or your cursor, or your text. Simple things that will just make it easier to be everyday use.
Right. And I love that it's people-centered, right?
Always.
Designing for people, not only people with disabilities, but when you put people with disabilities at the center in these designs as well, you design for all, you make room for all. You democratize access to incredible designs and products for all. And that's pretty powerful. So as AI evolves into autonomous agents, right? What does it mean to design systems that are both accessible, responsible, and why are these priorities interconnected?
Well, I think it's an incredibly important time. I really do feel the burden and the responsibility to make sure that this era of technology is inclusive and accessible. And it's got to be both. And make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of past technology eras. One of the really sort of humbling and in some ways mortifying facts is that only 4% of the world's websites are accessible to people with disabilities who use assistive technology, like screen readers who are blind or low vision going through a page. 4%. We can't do that in this era. We have to make sure that we are responsible and thoughtful, and we have the right systems and controls as we go into this era. And so some of the very simple things that I think we're just important that we're doing is making sure that the data is inclusive of disability. One of the recent announcements we were sharing yesterday with Natasha Crampton, our Chief Responsible AI Officer, we were sharing that we have added a whole slew of data in of imagery of people with disabilities, sparked by the community who sent me a whole great number of texts and messages saying, Jenny, I'm not getting a really good image and I'm a little person, or I'm blind or low vision or autistic or I have Down syndrome. I want generative AI to be really making a representative image of me. And so we worked with the Little People of America. We worked with Kilimanjaro Blind Trust, and we added data so that you are leveraging generative AI in the right way. And that's important as we think about agentic. Agentic is exciting. What it gives us the ability to do is create things like custom neural voice. So imagine if you lost your voice due to a disease like ALS or MND, it can create a personal voice with a very small amount of data that really is accurate, that you can very quickly leverage and use to communicate with your loved ones. Nothing more powerful than that. But we have to make sure the security of that voice, the privacy of that voice remains true and local. And so we've got to build ethically, responsibly, and carefully. But if we get this right, we won't be at 4%. We will unlock paradigm changing.
Right.
And I think the best example, neurodiversity is big, huge. And now we have agents that empower people who are coming in newly diagnosed with ADD or autism or dyslexia or dyspraxia. Quick agent, I can get every support I need to help me or my child.
Right.
Just referencing the libraries right there and then.
Right.
It's helping people with their journey.
Exactly. And I think for a lot of people, they don't realize that like not all disabilities, you can view them, right? Like you're not going to know, right? And so I think when people can feel themselves or view themselves in, if it's an image, if it's a product, it makes them feel whole in a certain way, thought of, right? Not forgotten. Even just sitting here and hearing you say like Kilimanjaro Blind Trust, I'm like, wow, like that's on the African continent. I grew up there. Like it makes me feel not left behind, which over the past even 50 years, a lot of technology has forgotten the African continent. And so how does that feel to be forgotten? Now think about that in another form with people with disabilities. And so thank you so much for talking to me here about this. This is really important work. Where can people go to learn more?
Please, please, please go check out the website, microsoft.com/accessibility. Check us here at Ignite at Microsoft Commons downstairs, right by the tree. We are right there. There's an incredible team that have all flown in to support this. You're gonna wanna speak to these guys. They are the best of humans. And thank you to you for all your support and advocacy and just keeping us grounded. We love you guys.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you all for tuning in. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.